In this video, we'll look at important Kubernetes or kubectl commands that you should definitely know, along with examples and hands-on demo. Knowing these useful commands will help you manage and troubleshoot issues in Kubernetes very easily, so make sure to watch this video till the end. Let's start. Alright, before you get started with learning important Kubernetes commands, there are two main things you require. The first is a Kubernetes cluster, and there are different ways to create a Kubernetes cluster. You can create a Kubernetes cluster on a cloud using AWS, Azure, GCP, or any other cloud platform. Another way is to create a Kubernetes cluster locally using minikube or kubeadm. For this demo, I'm going to be using minikube, and you can install minikube from this documentation here. Along with a Kubernetes cluster, you also require kubectl, which is a command line tool used to manage Kubernetes. And you can install kubectl from the same documentation. So here you can install kubectl, and here you have details to install minikube. I already have them installed, so we are ready to get started with learning important Kubernetes commands that you should definitely know. After you have minikube installed in your local machine, you need to run the command minikube start, which will go ahead and create a Kubernetes cluster locally for you. You can see the explanation here. This command sets up minikube, a tool for running Kubernetes cluster locally for development purposes. And now we have a Kubernetes cluster running in our local machine. You can also confirm by running minikube status, and it says control plane running, kubelet running, API server running. And if you don't have any idea of what is API server or kubelet, make sure to watch the previous video, but I have explained everything. Along with the cluster, we know we need to also have a kubectl command line tool, which you can install from here. And after you have installed it, you can simply run the kubectl version command to confirm if it is installed. You should get a similar output like this. This means we are now ready to run commands on Kubernetes and manage our workloads. But what if we are not using Kubernetes cluster on minikube? Rather, we have a Kubernetes cluster created on cloud provider, maybe AWS or Azure or GCP. How can we connect the Kubernetes cluster on the cloud with the kubectl in our local machine? We do that by setting context, and different cloud providers will have different command for that. Let's say you have a cluster created in AWS using EKS service, which is Elastic Kubernetes Service. You run a command AWS EKS --region update kubeconfig with the cluster name. And this command is used to connect Amazon EKS cluster with the kubectl. Similarly, if you have a cluster created in Azure, this is the command. For GKE, this is the command. So this command set the context for the specified cloud managed Kubernetes clusters, allowing subsequent commands to interact with the chosen cluster. So when you use minikube, the context is already set to run the kubectl commands on minikube cluster. And you can also check that by running kubectl config current context command, which will give you which cluster is connected right now with kubectl. So when I run this command, it tells me minikube is a cluster which is connected to kubectl, and all the kubectl commands will apply on this particular cluster. And if you also want to get the list of all the different contexts you have, you simply need to run the command kubectl config get contexts. So I'll say get contexts, and this will give me all the list of the cluster that I can use or switch to. Right now I'm connected to minikube, but I can switch to any other cluster and start working on it. All this context data is stored in a file which is under .kube/config under the home folder. So if I do cat.kube/config, you will see the detail about all the clusters, and you can also switch to start using in them. Right now we are connected to minikube, so we're going to run the commands on minikube cluster. Now let's start with learning the commands to create, delete, or edit Kubernetes object. There are many different Kubernetes objects like pod, deployment, replica set, stateful set, services, nodes, and a lot more that I believe you already know. If you want me to create a video explaining all these different Kubernetes objects, do let me know in the comment section. In Kubernetes, objects are generally created using manifest files. Manifest files, if you don't know, are short YAML or JSON documents that defines how a specific cluster resource should be configured and managed. For example, this is a manifest file, and the kind is deployment. You should always look at the kind, which defines what Kubernetes object is it. So this is where to create a deployment. We also have an example here. So this is the official documentation for Kubernetes deployments object. And if I scroll down, this is a deployment manifest to create 3 pods of this image, which is Nginx. Now, if I want to have a deployment with 3 pods having Nginx image, I am going to create a manifest file. For now, I'm going to copy this and create a file in my machine. Let's create a file, name it deployment.yaml. Inside this, I'm going to put what I have here. So this is a deployment having 3 replicas with this image, and it's running on container port 80, This is the name of the deployment, which is nginx deployment. I'm going to save this. And now if I want to create this deployment in my Kubernetes cluster, I need to run the command kubectl apply -f, which stands for the file and the file name. So I'm going to copy this, and once I do that, I'm going to get a message saying deployment.apps/ the name of the deployment is created. Similarly, if I want to delete something, I'm just going to run the command kubectl delete -f with the name of the file. Make sure the file is present in the same folder wherever you're running this command, or else you need to put the exact path. So the apply command is used to create something when you have the manifest file. So I have the manifest file here, and I'm going to create it. Similarly, if I just run the command, which is delete, and it will go ahead and delete it. Now let's go and create it again. And this time I want to edit something. So in this, let's go and edit the replicas count. So instead of having 3 replicas, now I want to have only 2 replicas. So I'll save this and run the command kubectl apply again. Once I run the command, instead of created, it's saying configured, which means it has been scaled down to 2 replicas now. So how do you confirm this? To confirm this, we are going to run the command get. This command retrieves information about different Kubernetes resources such as pods, services, and deployments. So using this command, we have now created and also edited the deployment. According to these commands, we should have a deployment with 2 replicas having nginx image that we have used from this manifest, right? So let's run the command kubectl get to see if that is true or not. So I'm going to run the command kubectl get deployments. So once I run this, you will see there's a deployment that is created, nginx deployment 71 seconds ago. And this was something which I had already, which is 71 days ago. So this is the deployment which you have, and you can get that using kubectl get deployment commands. Similarly, you can run the kubectl get command for pods, for services, config map, stateful set, everything. So I'm going to run kubectl get pods, and you will see all the pods in the default namespace. If you run kubectl get nodes, you will get the information about the nodes in your cluster. So this is kubectl get command, which is used to get the information about different resources. But you can also use this in different ways. Let's say you want to get everything present in the cluster, deployment, services, nodes, pods, everything. You're going to run the command kubectl get all. This will list you the pods, the services, deployments, replica sets, and stateful set. So the get all is used to get everything in the default namespace. And if you want to get it everything in other namespace, you need to use the -n with the namespace, let's say kube system. So it will get everything inside the kube system namespace. So these are the pods, this is services, daemon sets, deployments, and replica sets. But what if you want to get this data in YAML format or in JSON format? You can do that by running kubectl get all -o YAML. This will now give you the output in YAML format. Once press enter, you can see this is all in YAML format. Correct? Similarly, you can just do it by running JSON, and this time it will give you in JSON format. So now this is in JSON format. Along with this, you can also run the command -o wide, which will provide you with more extra information. So instead of just showing you the pod, it will now show you also the IP address and the node on which it is running. Along with this, for services, it will give you more information, similarly for deployments. So using -o, you can change the output. You can change the output into YAML, into JSON, or also using -o wide, which will give you extra information. So this was get command, which is used to retrieve information about different Kubernetes objects. So now we know if you run kubectl get pods command, you will get the list of all the pods in your cluster, and you will also get the information or the status if they are running or not. So we have a pod here, which is my new pod, that is showing us an error, which is image pullback off. So how can we see what is the error actually, or how can we see more information about this particular error? You can do that by running kubectl describe command. So I'm going to say kubectl describe, and I'm going to describe the pod. So I'll say pod and then the name of the pod, which is my new pod. Once I do this, it will give me all the information about the pod. And if I scroll down, here are events. In the events, it is saying back off pulling this image, error image pullback off. This is the image we are trying to use. And we know this is not an image name because there's no image with this name in the Kubernetes. This is why it is giving us an error saying image pullback off. So using the describe command, you can get more information. So this is kubectl describe. This commands provide detailed information about a specific Kubernetes resource aiding in troubleshooting and understanding its configuration. You can run the same command with services, with deployments, anything you want. So let's say if I want to get the information about kubectl, let's get the deployment first. And I can also run kubectl describe deployment and the name of the deployment. So let's say I want to get the information about this Nginx. I'm going to press enter, and this gives me an information that this is in default namespace. This was created this time. This is a label and all the events. So earlier it was having 3 replicas, but now we changed it from 3 to 2. So it was scaled down. So we get more information about an object when you use kubectl describe command. Now let's look at imperative commands, which are very important if you work with Kubernetes every day, or if you are preparing for Kubernetes certifications, you need to know imperative commands. And what are imperative commands? Imperative commands allow quick actions without the need for manifest files. We already know if I want to create a Kubernetes object, let's say deployment, I need to create a manifest file like this. Similarly, if I want to create services, I also need to create a manifest file for service, which should be something like this. So there are 2 ways to create Kubernetes object. One is the declarative way, where you define a manifest file like this. The second is the imperative way, where you just run a command and the object is created. So this is how you can manage Kubernetes object using imperative command. This is the official documentation. And if you see an example here, using kubectl create service, you can create a service without actually having a manifest file. Using imperative commands, you can create deployment, you can create pods, services. You can also edit them, update them, lot more. So let me show you an example of how you can use imperative command to create a deployment in your cluster. You can do that by running kubectl create deployment, and I'm going to name this deployment, let's say my new deploy. Along with this, I can pass few parameters like what is the image, how many replicas do I want. Let's use the image Redis, and I want to have 2 replicas. So I'll say replicas equals to 2. Once I do this and press enter, without having manifest file, it's still now created. And I can also confirm that kubectl get deployment. You can see deployment is now ready, which is created 9 seconds ago, and it's here. I can also check the, so I'll do kubectl get pods, and I should have 2 pods running for Redis. So I have 2 pods with this. Let's see what image it is using. Running kubectl describe pods and the name of the pod, which is here. So the image this pod is using can be found here in the image section. So you can see image is Redis. So this is how you can use imperative command. Similar to this, you have imperative commands also for services, for pods, and lot more, which you can see from this documentation present at the end of this Notion doc. So this is the create command used for cluster rule binding, config map, cron job, deployment, all of these. So if you want to create, let's say config map, you can use kubectl create config map with the name of it and all the other options required. Similarly for service, you will use kubectl create service or kubectl expose service command as well. So this is imperative command for you, which will help you create Kubernetes object very fast by just running a command without using manifest files, which can help you save a lot of time. But on the other hand, it's not recommended for production use case. So manifest files in Kubernetes are best practice as they offer a clear version controlled and reproducible way to declare the desired state of your application. So it's recommended to have manifest files rather than using imperative commands, because you don't have a record of what you are applying and you cannot also version control. Whereas if you have manifest files, you can save it on GitHub or GitLab, and you can also change it, have it version controlled. So it's always recommended to have manifest files. Let me show you a way where you can create a manifest file using imperative command. So I want to create a manifest file for deployment, which should use MongoDB image and should have 2 replicas. The name should be Mongo deploy. So I can simply command kubectl create deployment, and the name of the deployment should be MongoD-deploy. And I want to use the image, which is going to be Mongo. I want to have 3 replicas. So let's say 3 replicas. And now I don't want to actually create this, but I want to have a manifest file created using this imperative command. How can I do that? I can do that by using dry-run equals to client. What does this do? This dry run attribute is used to print out the output, but don't actually create it. So I'm going to use that, which will help me create manifest files. And if I want to create this manifest file, I need to have the output in YAML format. So I'll run this command, and if I press enter, you can see this is the manifest file which is now created, and I can store this in any file. Let's say Mongo d YAML. if I do cat mongod.yaml, now I have a manifest file created, which I can simply apply by running kubectl apply -f mongod.yaml, and you can see a deployment will be created. So now I have a deployment created. Also, I have a manifest file ready, which I can now version control. So next time onwards, you don't need to remember or type manifest files. You can simply use the imperative commands to create manifest files for you. Now, before we complete the imperative command part, if you look here in the create section, there is no pod present here. So can we not create pod using imperative commands? We can actually do that, but we use run option. So we use run and then the pod name along with the image. It is usually because whenever you create a pod, it has to be created inside the deployment. So best practice is to create pods through deployment, but not individually. So let me show you an example. Let's say we want to create a Kubernetes pod, which should be running nginx image. So I'll say kubectl run, name of the pod, which is my nginx, and then the image is going to be nginx. All right. It says my nginx pod has been created. I can confirm running kubectl get pods. And you can see the nginx pod is now running. It was created 6 seconds ago and it's now in running state. So using kubectl run command, you can create pods imperatively as well, which is here. The kubectl command creates a pod imperatively, allowing quick pod deployment without the need for manifest files. So now we have learned 2 ways of creating Kubernetes object. The first is the declarative way, where we have the manifest file and we run the kubectl apply command to create Kubernetes object. The second is the imperative way, where we run the commands and create Kubernetes object. So in this imperative way, we don't have the manifest file. So how can we change something? If I want to edit something, I don't have the manifest files to make the changes. So you can use the kubectl edit command, which will let you edit imperatively. So if I run kubectl edit deployment, and I want to edit this deployment, which was created imperatively. If it is created imperatively, it does not have the manifest file. Kubectl edit deployment, the name of the deployment, and if I press enter, now I can make the changes and then it will apply. So let's go and change the replicas from 2 to just 1. Now I'm going to save this by running wq, and you can see it says deployment has been edited. So you can use kubectl edit command to imperatively edit Kubernetes objects. Similarly, there are other imperative commands that can help you save more time, which is kubectl scale deployment. So instead of changing the replicas by running this, you can simply scale and define how many replicas you want, either 2, 3, 4. All the commands are going to be present in this documentation. Also the other documentation, that make sure you go through them if you want to know more about imperative commands. So now we know using kubectl edit command, we can imperatively edit deployments, services on any other Kubernetes object. Let's try to do it one more time. So I'm going to say kubectl edit deployment my deploy. And now I want to change the name of my deployment. So I'll say instead of my new deploy, I just want it to be called as deploy. Let's try to save this. I'm going to say wq. And it gave me an error saying a copy of your changes has been stored to this. And it's not changed. So if I just do kubectl get deploy, it's still my new deploy. But the copy is stored here. So in Kubernetes objects, there are certain things that cannot be changed, such as name or the image, which are known as immutable. So certain fields of resources like its name or type cannot be edited using kubectl edit. For such cases, the kubectl replace command is used to enforce an update by deleting and recreating the resource. So now we know the copy of this change has been stored here. So instead of running kubectl edit, I'm going to use the kubectl replace -- force command. You can see it says deployment has been replaced. Let's use the get deploy command, and you will see a new deployment has been created 4 seconds ago, which is now not ready yet. So let's use the -watch or -w to see. The new deploy is ready. We also have a my new deploy here, but very soon it will be deleted because we have replaced, which will delete this and now created with a new name. So this is how you can use the kubectl replace command. This command forcefully updates an object by replacing it with a new configuration. This will help you a lot in troubleshooting and editing manifest files. Now let's look at debugging commands that can help you troubleshoot issues in Kubernetes. We have already seen the describe command that provides you with information, which can also help you in troubleshooting, but there are more commands. And to demonstrate this, let's do an example. So I'm going to create a deployment using the Mongo image, and we are going to then run the debugging commands to see. We'll say kubectl create deployment, name of the deployment, let's say Mongo, and I'm going to use the image, which is going to be Mongo image, and I want to have 2 replicas running. So I'll say replica equals to 2. And now the deployment has been created. I can confirm by running kubectl get deployment, and you can see a deployment has been created 6 seconds ago. Alright, let's see the pods as well. So if I do kubectl get pods, I can see 2 pods of Mongo are running right now. In software world, we know if there are any issues or if you want to check how is our application working, we always check the logs. So to get the logs of any application running here, you can run kubectl logs command. Logs and then the pod you want to get the log for. So I want to get the logs for this particular application or this particular pod. I will say kubectl logs and then the pod name. Now you can see the logs of this pod and you can troubleshoot if there are any issues, or you can find out what is the problem. So this is the command to get the logs, which is kubectl logs and the name of the pod. So now we know how to get the logs for an application, but what if I want to go inside this container and do some commands or run some commands? I can do that by using the kubectl exec command. So I'll run kubectl exec -it, which stands for interactive terminal, the name of the pod, and then the command. So I'll say /bin/bash. Once I do that, I'm now inside the MongoDB instance or MongoDB pod here. Inside this, I can run any command I want to list down all the files present here or anything I want to do. So to go out, I'm going to run the exit command, and now I'm back to my local machine. I'm not inside the container anymore. ls/etc. Now I'm going to get everything present inside this /etc folder for this particular pod. So you can use kubectl exec -it to go inside the pod if you want to, or run a command directly inside the pod. So this is kubectl exec -it. This commands demonstrate debugging techniques. So we have seen kubectl logs to get the logs and kubectl exec to go inside the container or run the commands inside the container. Lastly, let's look at logging and monitoring commands. We already know how to get the logs for a pod, but let's see how we can get the resources like CPU and memory for pods or for nodes. So to get the logs, we run the command kubectl logs with the pod name, but for getting the CPU and memory, use the top command. So we'll say kubectl top and then pods. So we see the CPU used by this pod and the memory used similarly for all the other pods as well. The same command can be used with the nodes as well. So I can say kubectl top nodes. Right now this is minikube, so it only has 1 nodes and it gives you the information about minikube here. CPU used is 8% and memory used is 57%. So this is the top command that is used to get these resources like CPU and memory for pods or for nodes. So these are all the important commands that you should know about Kubernetes. I hope this video was informative. I also have 2 documentations by Kubernetes itself. The first one is the kubectl cheat sheet, which has all the commands that you will require when working with Kubernetes, and you can go ahead and check it out. This is by Kubernetes official documentation. So every time there's a new command, they will obviously update it, and you should only refer to this. Similarly, I also have the second document, which is this one that will give you more idea, and it's presented in a nice way. So you can use this 2 documentation to know about more Kubernetes commands. I hope this video was informative. Do let me know if you have any questions, any doubt, and if you want me to share this document, do let me know in the comment section. Thank you and have a good day.